So this one has the phone step. 1, get the objectives of 2 very important stakeholders. 2, draft a high-level plan. 3, risk assessment. And 4, verify and validate. What are we talking about? The first of 2 videos that we're going to do on project management strategy. So 4 steps instead of 3. Normally we only do 3. If you've been finding that approach, very straightforward steps that you can take immediately, is useful, please feel free to like and subscribe, forward us to somebody, or join us on Facebook. The group is called Leadership Driven Project Management. Okay, so when we talk about project management strategy, it's like it's the walking, talking example of why the need for clear definition is so big. You see, when I talk about project management strategy, I'm usually talking about how the project fits into the strategy of the organization, but my partner Michael had a different look at it. As far as he was concerned, it was more about the strategic way that you go about executing your project. I think they're both valid, so we're going to do a video on each one of them. The first one is going to be Michael's take. We'll round it out with closing out on mine. First thing that he always has told his students, and I agree, is to make sure that we have very good clarity around the sponsor's objectives and the client's objectives. You know me, I'm also going to suggest that what you want to do is understand what their objectives mean to the strategic goals that they're each trying to attain. And even when you have an internal client, it's entirely possible that your sponsor and your internal client may have completely different ideas about what this one project is supposed to achieve. So you want to make sure that you have that straight at the beginning. Of course, you're going to look for places where they intersect, but you also probably want to be very much aware of the places where, and what are the odds? Or as I like to say, Murphy being live and well, meaning if it can go wrong, it might go wrong. You probably want to know a little bit about where the potholes might be. I know. That was step 3, which is to include risk assessment, but that's okay. When we're talking about your sponsors and clients' objectives, that definitely calls for a discussion about risk, doesn't it? Okay. Also, once you've got that information, you want to draft a high-level plan. Now, a couple of my students are probably thinking, she has always told us that planning is not an ivory cubicle. As a matter of fact, she's been a big proponent of making sure that other members of the team are involved in this effort and not changing that. What I'm suggesting is that you get a few of your key team members, sit down and draft a high-level plan. Don't get too detailed because let's face it, especially in this day and age when a lot of us are taking a very iterative approach to our planning, you want to make sure that you get some agreement before you go too far. But of course, one of the most important parts of that plan, whether you're planning to execute in a predictive methodology or an iterative methodology, is an understanding of how very important a risk assessment is. At a preliminary level, you want to have a sense of just how much risk is in the environment in which you're going to be executing the project. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do on a major and comprehensive risk assessment because, well, first of all, you can't. But even drafting just a high-level plan, you're going to get some sense of what the risk values are in the environment in which your team is going to have to be executing. Oftentimes, we like to explain to you why this is important. So go out on a limb and suggest that maybe we probably don't have to explain to you why a risk assessment is so important here. But drafting a high level plan and getting your sponsors and your stakeholders, your key client objectives articulated in a very specific, very explicit fashion, well, that may need a little bit more support. So here's the thing. I'm not sure if you're one of those few people, but I have met very few people who can practically read your mind. And every time I have run into somebody who it appears can practically read your mind, it turns out they were reading it in a second or third or possibly fourth language, but not in the language that you were thinking. So we've got a massive opportunity for misunderstanding. As a matter of fact, I worked with one client who had a tendency of enjoying a demonstration of the bond and the relationship we had. I'd worked with him for a number of projects in the past. And so I don't know when this happened. I do know when I noticed it. He had a habit of finishing my sentences, almost as if he could say, look, I have worked with Kimi for so long. Kimi and I are so simpatico. She's going to finish her sentence. And it got to be kind of a delicate thing because the thing was, at least a third of the time, I had to go back and kind of redirect the conversation because he wasn't 100% correct about how I was going to finish that sentence, which means he also wasn't about 100% correct about the thought I was trying to express in that sentence. At a certain point, diplomacy completely failed me. Rephrasing completely failed me, and reframing completely failed me, and I opted for a really radical approach. Sat him down, and I asked him, Jake, I've been kind of having a problem with something, and I was wondering if you would mind if we talked it out very candidly. He looked at me and he said, well, you can talk about anything. Well, but pretty much anything. I said, "Oh." He said, look, we've worked together for so long. I am so comfortable with you, and I trust you implicitly. But I'm pretty sure that still doesn't give me a 100% insight into how you're thinking and what you're thinking. Sometimes I get the feeling that that's what you're aiming for when you finish my sentences. And it's caused us a little bit of incongruity because when that's not actually what I was thinking, I have to kind of circle around, and I think it's confusing our team because they're not entirely sure what's happening when it appears like we're on the same page, but then it appears like we're not. And then after you and I have talked it out in front of them, it appears like we are again. It's just a little confusing for them. And frankly, I think our relationship is strong enough that I could tell you. I think it's probably not the best way for us to spend our time. There was this long silence, the kind of silence that seems to go forever. And he looked at me and he said, you're right. As a matter of fact, I know it's your habit to draft a high level plan, so I sort of already drafted one. And I looked at him and said, but it was based on a couple of assumptions I made that I thought I knew about what your approach was going to be. So I think maybe before I bring it up, maybe you and I should compare notes. Now, as it happened, his draft had some really helpful elements in it and also helped me to validate that my high-level plan was going in the right direction because of all the things that we did have in common between the two plans. And the things that we didn't have in common, well, it was a way of reinforcing the message. Nobody expects you to be telepathic, not really. And on occasion, when a client does think that they told you something, you're going to handle it on a case-by-case basis. And what I suggest is don't overthink it. Okay? Because step number 3, which is the risk assessment, includes assessing what kind of damage you might do to the relationship between you and a client or you and your sponsor. Once you have that high-level plan, and once you've done a fundamental, basic risk assessment for this project, now is the time to do the last step before we dig into the weeds. Verify and validate. Go back to these key and important stakeholders and say, okay, this is what I've got. And this is a preliminary, high-level take at how we're going to approach it. Does this sink in with what you had in mind? And here's a really important part. The other day when I was in class, I said, do this, and do this, and shut up. And they said, you tell the client to shut up? I said, no, I'm the clear definition. I said, no, I'm saying that after you say these things, you zip it. So again, get the objectives of both the sponsor and the client. A little Venn diagram. Make sure that you understand how those objectives tie in with the organization's objectives. If you're in an internal client situation, it can be really tempting to think, KimiKSP? Yeah. How about we just make sure? And when it's an external client, can you imagine how it must feel for them to have their vendor acknowledging the strategic importance of the project that they are entrusting to that vendor by making sure that there's clarity about how it ties into their own organization's strategic objectives. Clients don't hire you to do projects because it doesn't lead to any kind of achievement of strategic objectives. So why not get them to articulate it for you? It can also help you understand a little bit more about the kinds of changes they may request in the future. Yes, the kinds of changes they may request in the future, because they're going to request some. We just don't know which or what. And this will give us a little bit better. Okay. By the way, this is yet another one of our background choices. Of course, because the house has such an open floor plan, it means you might actually be hearing a replay of the Bears football game in the background. Look, these videos are designed to be of concrete help to you. Each and every video contains at least 3, as you can see, we have an extra one in this one, at least 3 suggestions that you can take and put into action for your benefit, for your team's benefit, ultimately for your organization's benefit immediately. Please look us up on Facebook. It's the Leadership Driven Project Management Academy group. It's open to the public, and we'd love to have you join us. In the meantime, if there's a topic you think you'd like us to address, please let me know. My contact information is always at the end of the video. I'm KimiKSP. Thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.